interest and came down. Thank you. If you've seen me do this before, there's probably going to be a lot of repeat. I haven't changed what I do that much over the years, although there is always something new, a little different. If you have questions, please, shout them out. I prefer that. That way I know I cover the things you're interested or have questions about. Obviously I can't show you everything, every single step, everything that goes into this. It takes me multiple days to get the end result. So I'm just going to start talking my way through the beginning and what I try and think about what I do, and hopefully you can get something from all that. As you can see with this, now the first thing obviously is preparing the kit. I spend a lot of time just with the sanding and the smoothing and sanding and priming and sanding and back and forth until you get it just nice and smooth. Obviously with the girl kits it's more important we have this perception about what they should look like, how the skin should be. You're going to use different painting techniques for different kind of figures. If I'm doing a monster, obviously I model it and it's going to be a coarser finish. Same thing with the male, but with the girl kits there's this perception of the pristine finish and how it should look, and so to achieve that it takes a little time to get it nice and smooth. I use the rust primer, and the reason I use this rust primer is, to me, with the gray primer, the colors have when I first start, the color has a greenish tint. To me, when I first start laying the skin tones down, it's green, and so by putting the rust on, I'm starting with a warm base, and so that's going to enhance my colors. There's a lot of different approaches to how you build up your colors. And you could have 6 guys up here and everybody's going to do it differently, and some will go, they start with the lightest and go to darkest. Some start in the middle and work both ways. For me, I've found the easiest way to build up my colors is to start dark. I do the darkest colors first. And the reason, if you just think about it, the hardest places to get are the recesses, the inside, the underneath. Okay, and those are your darkest parts. So what I do is get the dark parts done first, and then I just get lighter and lighter and lighter. And as I work, what I'm doing is I'm moving my airbrush out, so the medium colors are going to be more horizontal. My highlight colors are going to come down from the top, like the way the light is. So my airbrush is mimicking the direction of the light source, and I'm using less and less color as I go. Now I do use a lot of paint. I mean, obviously, if you're covering everything with the darkest color, some people see it, well, that's an awful waste of a dark color that you're never going to see. It's just that in the long run, to me, it's a little easier. So I build up the colors that way. Reference. To me, reference is the greatest thing. The more reference you can get, the better. It's nice. For me, when I'm doing a commission piece, I'll ask sometimes, who did you have in mind? And they'll give me the name of an actress or somebody, and I'll find some pictures and work from that on my colors. And I have made up these little cards that I use that have opaque colors and transparent colors. And what I do is just sometimes, I don't do this every single time, but sometimes it's helpful to put this card like next to the figure and say, okay, on here, well, the leather tan works good for the dark parts, and maybe the Bambi brown in here. And it gives you a starting point, okay, on picking a color. Because I feel like the thing you don't want to get into is the rut or the habit of automatically going with that same routine of colors. Okay? I probably use 12, 13, 14 layers of color building up. Okay? I will start with opaques and get the basic light and shadow worked out. Semi-transparents are nice because they're transparent, but if you keep applying it in the area, now don't do it all at once or you'll flood it, but you can build it up to an opaque. Okay? It'll eventually get opaque, so it's a nice gradual transition. Transparents I use a lot just to adjust the tone, the coloring. Okay? Because the colors straight out of the bottle to me are kind of raw. And so it's nice to add some warmth or just some other colors to the buildup. Let's see here. This is I keep a book of things. This is the mermaid girl that I did. Well, here's the list of all the different colors that I use to build up the skin. Okay, I started with the primer, then red oxide, a mix of orange and GK flesh, a semi-transparent GK flesh, pale flesh, semi-transparent, a transparent yellow ochre, transparent orange, transparent natural flesh, transparent bright flesh, pale flesh, semi-transparent, vivid orange, sepia, transparent golden yellow, pale flesh, semi-transparent. I don't really have a plan. My only plan is to slowly build it up and keep adjusting it until it looks right. So I'll get partway through, I'll step back and look at it and say, you know what, she's too pale, she needs a little more warmth, and I'll go and look at my cards and decide, you know what, I think I'll use this one and add some of that color to it. The other thing, people say, why do you use so many colors? We can pass this around. I did this little printout. I got a picture of a model, and the first one is I put it in Photoshop and used a filter so that it only has 3 layers. So it's basically just a dark, a medium, and a highlight. Okay? This one over here has like 8 layers. Okay? There's more colors in it. There's more variation. So the more color you can work into it, the more vivid, the nicer your end result's going to be. At least, you know, if you apply them carefully, build them up. I try not to completely paint out any one color. You know, even though the darkest color is the first thing I put down, at some part on this figure, when you look at it, you're going to see that color, and the next one, and the midtones, and so I'm never completely painting things out. We can pass this around, you can get a closer look. Another thing I'll pass around, because I'm never going to get to a finished one, is this shows the steps. This is Mother of Dragons, and again, with the basic rust primer and then basic skin tones and getting the lights and darks, and then I started putting some transparents in and punching some pastels and a little more transparent, and the final highlights. So again, this is 8 steps, but there's probably 12 to 13 different colors. And sometimes I'll do the same step twice. I'll put what I think is a highlight, and then I'll shade, tone it down with some transparency, and I have to punch up the highlights again. So I have these 2 pictures, and they're just, pass them around, and I mean, you can take a look. Don't worry about them. You're just on cheap paper, and it's just there to see. Okay. Any question on that part? All right, we'll start. I'll go through what I do. Okay, this is for my cleaning.
Jim, quick question.
Yeah.
When you spray them, what's the
pressure
of your tank?
Usually I go higher, like 30.
Okay.
30 to, let me see, I can't see that. I think that's 30 to 35. I mean, and the reason I use a little bit higher pressure on it, it's a finer mist. It's a softer mist. It's diffused a little better. So, well, let's just get started here. For this, what I'm going to do is, I said don't rely on certain things. Well, I'm just going to go with some standard things that I typically do here. So this is a leather tan. Okay. And I'm not going to paint over the whole thing. She's just done in her basic. So I'm just barely pushing down on the trigger, staying back, 6 inches or so here. Moving, I keep it moving. And I'm not worried about the undercuts getting underneath so much because it's covered. Now I will do a light. I'll put a little bit of color underneath, just a little bit so it will blend in better. So right now, this is basically like another base color, only I'm not trying to get it everywhere. Picking up the muscles, where the muscles are and where things are protruding out. And I didn't spend a whole lot of time getting this perfect for painting. I'm probably going to throw this in the back when I get home because there's still little things that I need to patch and fill. The high parts, I find myself a lot of times I start with the shoulder to see. But you see what I'm doing? I'm angling down on the figure, because the dark parts, that's where my shadows are. So I'm not worried about too much about getting under here. I will mist it a little bit, you know, just to carry that color down so they blend together a little more, so they harmonize a bit. So when I'm done here, it's going to look like she's almost all leather tan, except for the deepest recesses, the hardest to reach parts. I'll put a little paint in there. And you just work around. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the back. If you can, obviously you see the paint glossing up, like, oh, too close, too much.
Yeah, before you go to the next flush, do you seal or you just go straight?
It depends. I probably don't seal the first couple steps. When I start getting into the semi-transparents and the transparents,
Then you seal
that's
it
when
to
I
make
start
sure.
sealing in between. I might do two or three colors and then seal it. All right.
Jim, are you thinning that down before you?
This is
go for the
straight
bottom?
out of.
Okay.
This is straight.
You never have any problem with it clogging up or anything?
Not with this brand. I mean, I'm not
Not
here to
the
do a
Lego?
commercial for him, but I mean, I haven't had any real problem. Okay. Usually in between to clean, I just run. This is just window cleaner. I just run window cleaner. After 3 or 4 applications or 3 or 4 different colors, I'll run some of that Winsor Newton brush cleaner through here.
Painkiller, right?
What's that?
The painkiller.
Yeah, boy, that's for sure. This is Future. I use Future to make my own semi-transparents. If you have a flesh and you don't have the semi-transparent GK flesh, I mix it like 50-50. 5 drops of this, 5 drops of paint, and it gives you like a semi-transparent. In fact, that's what I used to do all the time until they made the semi-transparents, and so I'll use that. Okay, let's go up. This is a color that there was a Kit Builders had a line of colors, light tone, freestyle, and they had a color that was called Natural Flesh. I mean, that's a pretty offensive name when you think about it. Natural Flesh. It was, a light pale skin color. I always hated the name. Suggested let's change it, to a warm flesh. But it was a warmer skin tone. To me, the garage color kits, they're great for your basic values. They look a little cold. So I have my own. It's an equal mix of garage kit flesh and the bright flesh. It makes it a little warmer. Okay? So I have that. It's all mixed. I have a big bottle of it, and that's what I kind of go to when I start doing, the next thing. Now sometimes I'll even at this step I might even start going in with a semi-transparent. But for now, shoulder, a little safer. And I feel like if you're doing it right, you barely notice the buildup of color. And at this point, I'm still going from basically horizontally in with my color and down. Oops, a little heavy there. I'm not too worried though if it's a little bit heavy because I still have to go lighter shades on top. You're almost letting the sculpt work for you when it comes to shading. You don't have to figure out where should I put the shadows because you're letting the sculpt, which is 3-dimensional, and if you're painting in the direction of the light, the paint's going to fall where the light would fall. Okay? You don't have to say, should I put a shadow under here? No, should I highlight this? It's too quiet.
You move in circles to keep it from having line work.
I keep it moving so I don't get it building up too much in one place.
Right.
Are you going for African American?
At this point, I'm not going for that. I mean, if I were, I would probably start with the darker. They have like a darker base tone African flesh. I mean, I'd start with the darker brown and then work my way up to the mid-tones. I know I should. It's hard for me to go fast. I'm a slow worker.
At this point, are you getting any splatter look at all, or is it totally fine mist?
So far, I'm good.
The rest of it will be
If I
splatter.
started getting splatters, I'd stop and clean my brush.
Okay.
It's a lot of overlapping, light misting layers of color. Just got a little heavy there, but. And I know it looks like we're just painting over the whole thing again, but I'm concentrating more on the raised areas, the areas I want to highlight. All right, let's. I can't take too long, so let's just move on to another. And early on, I was a very big proponent. I thought you had to mix everything. And I mixed all my colors. Now there's so many colors that are ready. I'll use them straight out of the bottle for establishing the dark to light, the basic values on it. And then that's where I use the transparents. You throw the transparents in there, and then it makes it does what mixing used to do. Okay? So you just give this a quick rinse and we'll go a little lighter. And when it was this quiet at school, something wasn't good.
Somebody was getting
They
into
never
something.
sat this quiet through my demonstrations. Okay, this is GK Garage Kit Flush. For now, it's going to be my lightest one. But, and I usually have a glove on or something because check to make sure I'm not getting a spatter and all. And shoulder.
Do you use that as a highlight?
I'm starting to, it's not really a highlight yet,
But you're working your way up.
but
to
I'm
it.
starting to concentrate more on the areas that will be highlighted. Build up her abs, and top of the breasts, top of the chest, top of the shoulders. See, I'm hitting mainly the tops of things. I'm going to get the rib cage, the hips, the knees. Whoops, I got a little high, but again, it doesn't matter that I'm a little high because I'm going to get lighter still. And so the fact that I oversprayed a little, you're not going to notice it when I.
Do you usually start from the top, Jim, and then work your way down and into
I have, yeah, and no particular reason. I just find to make sure I'm lined up correctly. I like the shoulders are a good part to aim for, or her backside is a nice target because it's large, and if I'm off target, I can adjust. But just once you get spraying, I want to make sure I'm.
So at this stage, you don't really care about what they're wearing or anything, right? You're just kind of hitting the main body.
Oh, at this point, the clothes are, they don't exist. Yeah, if there's more flesh showing than clothing, it gets the whole thing gets painted this color, and then I'll mask it with typically silly putty, and then do the skin after. Before I mask, I will paint the edges of the clothing. Like once I get the skin done, if I know I'm going to use a base of a dark gray for the bandages, I'll brush paint all the edges with the dark gray, and then put the mask on, and then I'll spray the dark gray. That way I know my edges are clean. Okay, my edges are nice and sharp, and then I put the putty on, and then I'll spray. And it doesn't matter because it's the shadow color, so it looks fine once you take the putty on.
Yep.
Jim, Facebook Live, Jesse wants to know what kit are you painting?
This is Lilu,
Lilo.
Rob's.
Oh, Robin Tunde, Dark Pine.
Sorry. All the ones I have of his painted.
Sorry, Jesse. Thank you, Jim.
So is the philosophy with painting flesh, so many different layers, kind of capturing the idea that skin itself has many
Many
vessels
colors.
of building up the colors to make the final product versus clothing, which is a manufactured dye and tends to be more flat.
Well, it's not that they're flat. I mean, it depends how many colors you use. I mean, the GK flesh is great for one band of that broad spectrum.
Right.
Okay? So in order to hit all of those, you got to use different colors or put transparencies in. Now, it's not mandatory. I mean, obviously, not everybody wants to spend hours and hours working on, a skin tone. If you're satisfied, if you're happy with getting those three basic colors and it gets you an effect that you like and you're pleased with, that's great. I was always involved with color. I mean, I'm an art teacher, so obviously art classes in college. I was a painter on canvas before I was a painter on resin, and my master's degree is in painting. And the way I approached painting back then was to put my darkest colors down, and it's the way I painted on canvas. So when I started painting these things, I just sort of applied what I knew, and it worked on canvas, it works okay on this. Let me get another lighter shade. I'll switch to a semi-transparent at this point, because now I don't want to wipe out what I've done so far. So this might be a time. It's going to be transparent. You're going to see the color that's underneath, but as you build it up, it gets more and more opaque. Okay, so that's what I like about these. Also, my you might notice I spray paint the caps. I paint the caps the color, because I keep them in a drawer. So when I open the drawer, I can see the colors. And I have to pull them out. So I can see the colors, and then I also label them. I put an S on the semi-transparent and a T on the transparent, so I can just grab what I need right away. And I think this is it's in my hand. All right. So yeah, like I said, at this point she would have been sprayed. And another thing I like about these semi-transparents, they're a little bit forgiving. There have been times that I'm spraying and it's like, oh, I put too much on. But then when it dries, it gets a little more transparent and it's not as noticeable. It's almost like a warning. It's like, oh, you went too far, stop. So, every time I start, I see paper towels fluttering. So now in this step, I would be focusing more on the high parts. Top of the ribs, the abs. The nice thing about the semi-transparent is if you see something that you missed earlier, you can go over it, and since it's semi-transparent, you're still going to see the color that's underneath. I had a painting teacher in college. He said, don't completely paint out the color you have on there. If you don't like it, let some of it show through. It enhances, it just enhances. Now, I would end up doing the same area a couple of times because the more you go over it with the semi-transparent, the more opaque it's becoming. Again, a transparent color is never going to become opaque. It's just, you can still see through it. If you get it on too thick, it starts to pool and puddle. But the semi-transparents get more opaque. Now, they are a bit shiny, but that's not a problem. You just shoot some dull coat or a flat coat on it, and they flatten out pretty good. There's not much to see.
You have the head off, Jim. You usually paint the head with the body.
If it, like this one, she has a collar, so it's easier to paint the head separate, and then I can just glue it on. I'd rather do that because it's easier to handle for doing eyes and all that detailing. The arms, there's no band. So if I were doing this finished, I would have to have the arms on there. There's that side. Here's the the primer that I started with, and
Yeah, you see the difference.
that's what we're up to now. It's a little harsher looking up there. And if I get down this way, it's like, okay, the shadows look too dark. I can use the semi-transparent I'm working with, and I can just sort of give it a misting. Oh, no, all right. Because you're still going to see the difference between the light and the dark. It's just, it cuts down on the contrast. You don't want to have it too extreme. Yeah, we're the last one. Let me go with something even lighter. I mean, this might be too bright. I have, I'll go with, this is a virgin. The virgin flesh and pale flush. One's a little warmer. The other one's a little more yellowish. So I'm just going to go with, good thing I have the S's on there so I don't get my caps mixed up. This looks almost like pure white. I just want to try and get a little more contrast on here. Closer to, again, this is semi-transparent. And I'm working on my tops. I'm building up the highlight. It's not really, the last thing I will do, once I get everything where I want, is I'll go in with the lightest skin tone, semi-transparent, just to punch up the highlights so they stand out a little more.
So you said you put your opaques down first, and then your semi-transparents, and then transparents on top?
Typically, that's usually what I do. Unless I made a mistake in there, and it's like, okay, I'll go back to maybe the light opaque and redo that. I typically don't have to go back to the darker ones. I find the mid-tone one and go over that section and then build that up again. Shoulder. It's like you keep hitting the same parts. And since I'm going big in circles, it's fading out. It's highlighting that area, but it's also sending some of that color down the side, so it's not too harsh. This stuff, when you spray it straight on, it looks almost runny. If you overdo it, it looks runny. And that's what I like about it, is you can gradually build up the lighter shade. So I'm just doing basically the same thing over and over again with a lighter and a lighter and a lighter color. It's just I'm painting a smaller and smaller. When I started, I was doing bigger circles. I was covering more of it. And then as I get lighter and lighter, I'm concentrating more. It's not moving, or I'm not moving it around as much. I'm focusing the color in a specific area. And then sometimes I'll even just hold her and just give it a good, all from the top. So all the tops get a little more of that. Again, because that's where my light's coming from. Light source is coming from the top. So here's the darks. All right. I probably, if I were doing this at home, I would probably go another step lighter. Okay. And then, this is when I started thinking about, I look at the overall color on the side. Does it look natural enough? Does it match? Is it close enough to my reference thing? I'll hold the model right up against the reference pictures and say, oh, that picture's more orange. And so I might get transparent vivid orange and just lightly. You don't want to put it on super heavy, just a light mist, just to shift the color. You're not covering your shading. Your shading is going to stay there while you're using transparent. It's just you're enhancing your color. You're throwing some more warmth into it, or a little bit of a different color there. This, with the red band, that's that brush cleaner. See, I keep these 3 bottles in my air booth, and I want to make sure I'm using the dishwasher, you know, when I'm cleaning or when I make a semi-transparent. I do not want to get this in my semi-transparent, so that's why it has a red band on there. Because I made that mistake earlier on. Now with transparents, I'll do the same thing with my little cheat cards or whatever. I'll, you know, hold them over top, or I'll just put it next to the figure and decide, you know, I want it to be more towards this range. And I use sepia a lot, chestnut, leather tan. I use them a lot, and it'll depend upon the ethnicity, you know, of your source material, what you throw in there. Another thing that I'll do, all right, this is a gold toner. I mentioned sepia. Sepia warms it up a little. And sometimes I will spray one transparent, like from the bottom up, and then different transparent from top down. Just to add some other color to it. And again, it's not obvious. It's not the kind of thing that when you look at the model, you'll say, look at that, he has this color here and that color there. If you can see it, it's too obvious. Okay? It has to be subtle enough that it gives you the effect that you're hoping for, but not so obvious you can identify all the different elements. You know, you don't want to taste something of, ooh, too much salt. Although some people kind of like the salt. So this is just transparent sepia, which is going to make it more orange. And I get a little further back with those. And so all I'm doing is giving the whole thing a color shift. Now it's no longer those straight out of the bottle color. Okay, it's more of a unique individual thing. I remember thinking early on, I would hate to have a display case where every figure was, you know, all the same skin tones straight across, because those are the colors that are in my box. And so the nice thing is you can have your basic skin tone range, and then, you know, transparency, and just a little bit of transparent. It's going to make them all a little bit different. So I would do, you know, misses, and sometimes I tone her down and it's a little bit too dark. Well, then I'll get my semi-transparent out again and punch up the highlight a little more. Let's do that. I'll go back to semi. So she has chestnut, which is probably toned her down a few steps. So now I want to be able to see the highlights a little better. So I'm going to use the semi-transparent again. And because it's transparent, it's not going to completely block out what I just put on. It's still going to show through. I hope this isn't too boring. It's kind of a slow, boring, I mean,
It's a process.
it's a process. So now I'm more focused on certain parts. I'm not making as big a loop or a big a circle with my leg because it's more, you know, long. I use more up and down stroke.
Is that the semi-transparent version?
This is semi-transparent at this point.
Virgin flesh?
I think this right now is just a GK flesh. I'll do the virgin again. You know, and I would spray in between these, and I mean, seal it with dull coat or whatever you're using. And this step will take me a couple days. I mean, I like to do one part and set it down and walk away from it, and then maybe come back the next morning and see how it looks, and if it looks good, okay, I'm ready to move on to the next step. Let me get a little bit lighter, semi-transparent here. And if you do mix, one thing I like to tell people is try to avoid using white only to lighten your colors. People have a tendency to use white to lighten and black to go, and white just bleaches your color. It just, to me, it saps the color. if I use white, and sometimes you have to. I mean, there's certain, you can't lighten yellow except with white. If you use white with red, you get pink. So, use orange. A little bit of orange will lighten your red. Maybe a little bit of white, but not too much. Blue, again, if you use yellow, it's going to turn green on you. So with blue, you're sort of stuck using the white. But where you can, try not to use white to lighten your color. Try to use a lighter analogous color. In a color wheel, the colors next to each other are analogous. So you got red at the top, next to it is orange and purple. Well, if you want to lighten red, put a little bit of orange in it. You want to darken it, put a little bit of purple in it. It's a way to give you a richer, to enhance your color. Now I'm more focused. I'm not going as big as circles as I was before. I'm just trying to catch the top of her rib cage there. I got that a little heavy. Hopefully it'll dry okay. And if you're quick, I've gone in and just wiped it off with my finger. And as long as you sealed, every couple steps, you can go in and wipe with your finger. Although because I'm doing this now in front of everybody, that blob will probably stay there. He was lying to us. Okay, now I'm gonna. Oops. I shouldn't look. I should let you. So there's what I have so far. Here's what we started with. Okay, I would seal this, and now I move into another phase, and that's one thing I didn't bring a sealer, but it doesn't matter. No, that's okay. Like I said, it's just
Do you only use dull coat to seal? Flat, or do you ever
typically
use
that,
something
but
else?
lately I've been using Krylon has a matte
Oh, really?
clear, and it works pretty well.
Out of the rattle can?
Yeah, rattle can. I'm not sure, I don't know how thick it is, but I've been using it, and it's cheaper, And so, there was another brand that I had that was cheaper. I got it, Michael's Jeans something or other, and it wasn't really flat, but it was good for in between. It was good to seal. And then at the end, when you want it dead flat, that's when I would put dull coat. And a lot of times I'll use Garage Kit's flat coat. That's my very last thing there.
So if you were doing a smaller scale, like maybe 120 millimeter or something like that, would you still kind of go on the same route with all these?
I would take the same approach with dark to light. I've done one or two military, 120, and I do the same basic thing, but at a certain point I'll switch over and maybe use watercolors and oils. I've done some shading with oils more lately. I just did the Lion, Jesse's Denizens of the Zove, and there's metallics on there, and I put the basic metallics down, but then I got oils, like a burnt sienna, and just use that on the gold to shade the gold, because the gold still shows through. It's a transparent. I would use a blue on the silver to put a little bit of shading in there. Okay.
You're doing that by hand, the shading?
Pardon me?
Oils, you're doing that by hand, you're not...
Yeah, no, that's by hand. I use a brush after everything is done, because you can put oils on top of this, but you don't want to put acrylics on top of oils.
Yeah.
So that's usually the very last thing I do is the oils thing. So let's say this is I've reached the point where I'm satisfied overall with the coloring of this thing. But now what I want to do is I want to punch it up. I want to enhance it even more. If you look at a tasteful nude photo, you will notice that it is not the same color from head to toe. Okay? The arms, the bottoms of the legs might have more of a red to them. Now you can sometimes do that with transparent, or you can do it with pastels. The knees, the elbows, the top part of under the collarbone. You're going to notice there's more warmth in there. And what I like to use for enhancing is pastels. Okay, I had this set from college. It's a set of Rembrandt pastels. They're an expensive pastel. I have tried pan pastels. People like them. To be honest, I like these better. The colors stay better, at least for me with this set that I have. The colors seem to stay a little better, a little more intense than with the pan pastel. And all you do is, now I have to get some replacements for some of my colors here, but well, let's just use a little bit of red. Yeah, I just have sandpaper and just grind it on the sandpaper to turn it to more of a powder, and take your brush, and if I want to add a little warmth in here, just a little light brushing. I use a lot of there's burnt sienna under the breasts. I'll put a little bit of a warm color there.
The soft pastels?
Pardon me?
You're using soft pastels?
Oh yeah, you have to use the chopped
Yeah.
soft. Oil pastels won't work.
No, I mean, like, I've seen Rembrandt where you have the soft circular pastels and you have the hard, like,
Hard.
square
I
pastels.
don't know, I mean, these are
I like the hard stuff.
soft.
Just
Yeah,
doesn't-
these are soft.
Yeah.
Soft pastels. And I mean, a kit like this,
Okay, $80.
in college it was like $30. Now it's a lot. It's expensive, but you can buy them individually.
$5.
If you're fortunate to have an art store nearby, Dick Blick art suppliers, you can buy them individually on Dick Blick. You can order. I like to use the pastels for shading. Sometimes you're shading, the muscle tone isn't there as much as you'd like when you sprayed it. So you can go in with the pastels and punch it up. Let me use a little bit of it's like a burnt sienna here.
Do you have to go dark to light, or can you go light to dark? Or
Pastels, they don't work very well for highlighting. I mean, I've tried it, but it's not as efficient as shading. It works better when you're knocking down instead of trying to lighten it up. So I usually get all my shading, my highlights done with the airbrush. And if you got the highlight a little too much, you can knock it down with this. So this is more of a pastel-y,
How do you stop the pastels from running when you seal the kit?
once I get them set out, I just dull coat it and they're fine.
Really?
Yeah, not too close, mist it on, make sure, you don't want to get too close. And I usually just, get the loose chunks off and then mist it from a distance with the dull coat.
You doing it for the airbrush though? Or a
I've
can?
never done that. I have never bought like I said, but I guess I don't see why you couldn't.
When you apply the chalk, the brush is dry and the paint is dry that you're applying it on?
I'm sorry. My hearing aid battery died on me and
When you apply the pastel chalk, the brush is dry and
Yes.
also the surface is dry.
the surface is dry, everything is dry, and all I'm doing now is what I'm trying to do is go in where maybe the shading could use a little more contrast to it.
You're probably familiar with those chalks as you had that set since college, but like when you hit it with dull coat, does it go darker or?
Well, no, that's why I like these. When I put a dull coat, it stays pretty much what I
Stays the
put
same
on
color?
there.
Okay.
It doesn't change. Some more inexpensive pastels
disappear?
will disappear. They might darken. I've seen
Darken.
some that'll darken on you.
Super vibrant.
But with the Rembrandt, I've been pretty lucky that it stays pretty
the
much
same.
what I put on there. This is also another way of putting a little more color into it. And since it's sealed, if you put a little too much on, I just have a can of air. I'll give it a good get real close and just you get rid of most of it. If it looks a little heavy-handed, I'll use the canned air and just get rid of some of that stuff. Let me put a little pink.
And you got so much more control
Yes.
than the airbrush.
Yes, I mean, and that's one reason why I started using it. I mean, I was worried I wouldn't be able to get it exactly the way I want it with the airbrush. So this is a way to get the shading, to get the color exactly where you want it, and not have to worry. A little pink. If this were painted back here, I'd definitely put some pink under there. But this is again where it's helpful to have some reference pictures. Because if you look at them, you can see the variations. It's the kind of thing off the top of your head. Now, when you do it for a while, I mean, I'm used to knowing when I do the elbows, I always get a little more red around the elbows, around the knees. I would get a little more red, like around her knees, the hands, the fingers, so, you know. And then, okay, if I get a little too much on, it's not a problem. I seal it, go back to my semi-transparent and punch up the highlight a little bit. That is, trying to think of it. That's basically what I go through. That's the process. So opaques to get your basic values, semi-transparents and transparents to adjust the tone, pastels to enhance, add a little more color, seal it up, and then you're ready to move on to getting.
I have a question, Jim.
Yep, question.
1 second. When you're done, let's say this was completely the way you wanted it. Now you're going on to, because Alilo has the white straps, right?
Right.
What would you do now to preserve your flesh? after
Well, what
you
I would do
spend so
now,
much-
and this is where it gets tough. What I would do now, make sure this is sealed. I give it a couple shots of dull coat. I would take a brush, whatever my base color was going to be for the bandages. I would etch all these bandages. And then I'm a silly putty person. Now I got to sit there and I got to take silly putty and fill in all these areas and cover up the skin tone. And then I will airbrush the bandages. Okay. Filming, Mark Havison had a kit, Nefertiti, that I did for him. Had all these bandages, and that's what I ended up doing. I mean, I painted the flesh first, and then I had to go in with silly putty. Now there's different masks. I used to use a liquid frisket that you could brush on, but the problem with that is it would ruin your brush. I mean, I felt like I didn't have good control with it. And so I've gotten to the point where silly putty, I mean, I just roll out coils of silly putty, put it along there, push it up against, get all the edges, and then I fill in. And I have spent 2 hours putting silly putty mask on. But then it takes me 10 minutes to do the bandages, you know, and it's done. So I could brush paint the bandages, and there are some people who would brush paint, and they would look gorgeous. Okay? I'm not saying you can't do it. It's just that I'm lazy when it comes to the painting part. It doesn't make sense. I'll spend all that time just so I don't have to brush paint. But, you know, you can brush paint it and maybe get a good result. I feel like I'm not telling this.
Is that on purpose?
No, it's not on purpose. I'm glad to tell you anything I can share. Yes.
Say if she was a green-skinned woman. A green-skinned
Green
woman.
skin?
Yeah.
I would use the same approach. My approach is always get the values, your basic colors in the value. And it's the same approach even if they have clothing and I'm painting the shirt. What color do I want the shirt? Okay, let me get the values in there. You know, so it looks pretty good. Now do I want to shift it or change it? Now I don't do as much of the semi-transparent and the transparents with the clothing. To me, the skin is the big thing, and so I'll spend more time on that. I also use a lot of watercolor. Like on her bandages, there's little, you can see the little edges, there's little like seam lines. So I would airbrush that, get it done, seal it, and then I go in with a watercolor, and I would just paint over that with watercolor, let it dry, take a damp cloth, lightly wipe over it. Since I sealed it, I'm not going to take the paint off, but all the watercolor that's high on the surface will wipe off and the watercolor down and the lines will stay there. And then I'll just seal that. When I do the face, I do the eyes almost, except for the base iris color. You know, I paint the sclera, the white part, the paint, and then get the... Well, once that's done, even putting the iris down, I'll use watercolors because they come off easy. If you put the two irises set and you notice this one's a little too wide, you can just take a damp brush and just sort of shave away. You can trim it down until you get it the right size or the right shape. So watercolors are much more forgiving. I'll do everything on the eyes up to that point. I don't have this, I've seen some people, Saul's one of them, I've seen him just go, "Dip, dip, bup, 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 bup," and it looks wonderful. You know, and he's just using paint, just do this. I've seen people use airbrush and airbrush the dots of the eyes. I need the control and I need the safety of using watercolor, because if I make a mistake, I wipe it off and I don't have to start all over again with the sub-layers. I'm cheating here. Any questions? We got 7 more minutes.
Above the eyes for the brows, you use pastels in there too for like.
Above the eye? Well, a lot of times because of the way I shade, that's already
Done.
dark.
Okay.
When I'm painting the face, since I'm angling down, that's going to stay dark. Under the nose is staying dark. Under the lip is staying dark because I'm applying my lighter colors from a above angle.
Mm-hmm. For like a makeup effect or something like that.
Well,
say, for
yeah,
that.
the basic. Now, I might go in and punch up the color a little bit with a pastel. Yeah, add some warmth around there. A little, you know, if it's a monster thing, a little purples and some greens. And
I assume you paint all the parts at the same time to achieve the same color flesh.
yes, like if the
If
arms
the
were
arms were
separate,
separate and they glue on
I will paint
afterwards.
them simultaneously, because even when you write the recipes down, just the way you're doing it, the direction you're doing it, and so I'll take the piece over and hold it next to it. And, you know, sometimes even when I do that, you do have to do a little. There might be a. It's like, okay, this isn't highlighted on the bottom of the armband. It's a highlight, so I have to punch that up a little bit. But yeah, you do want to. And you can see she's a little glossy, a little shiny still. That's all right. You want to look at it, you want to pass it around.
How do you approach a head where the eyebrows aren't sculpted and you have to paint them in
Watercolor.
yourself?
Yeah, I'll put a watercolor-based eyebrow and look at them, and if it's too thick, I mean, I hope it's not toxic, because I'll just take my brush and then just slide it. I just slide it along the edge. It's like you're shaving away, just shaving it down. And sometimes like in the corner, you know, the very end of the eyebrow, you get that delicate taper. I can't paint that. I've never been able to paint it. I paint it and then shave it down until I get a nice taper. That's not finished. It's still very harsh, but it's just, I just wanted to give you the idea. Because like I said, I'll spend a week off and on getting the flat. I mean, I'll do the bulk of it in one day, but it takes a couple more days until I'm satisfied with the way it looks. Then usually once I get the flesh tones done, the next thing I want to do is get the face looking right. The eyes and all that. And then once that's done, then it's like, okay, we'll do the clothing and, you know, anything else. So,
Do you ever use inks on skin?
I haven't tried. It's like airbrush. People say, oh, what kind of airbrush you use? My first airbrush was a Pache, a VL, which is a very basic thing, and I used it. And then when I did articles for kit builders, they said, what airbrush do you use? And I told them, they go, oh, that's no good. And they took me over to Badger and said, here, you've got to use a Sotar. So I used a 2020 for a couple years. I had nothing else to compare. It was better than my VL. And then a couple Wonderfests ago, I was sitting at Jesse's table, and he had these Infinity and some other things. And he said, go ahead, play with it. And I played with it. It was like, oh, I kind of like that. But airbrushes are kind of personal. People, whatever they use, they really like it. I haven't really compared a lot to say this is the best. You know, this works well for me. Other people might hate it. I was talking with somebody the other day who tried this brush, but they like the 2020 better. They use that all the time. So,
But you use the same one all the time, or do you
I
have
use the same one.
multiple
I mean,
ones?
This is my workhorse thing. And like I said, once I'm done, like when I'm done for the day, I'll take some of this. This is that Winsor Newton stuff. And I'll fill it at least halfway and take a brush. Oh, here's my cleaning brush.
So you won't completely
just-
take it apart overnight? And
I
let it
won't
sit?
take it apart overnight. I take it apart when I'm done with the kit. When I'm done with the build, I break it down and put it in a sonic cleaner. And usually what I'm doing is while I'm scrubbing this, I'm also shooting air through it at the same time, and that sort of helps knock the junk out.
What are you using in the sonic cleaner?
Pardon me?
What kind of liquid are you using in the sonic?
Right now?
No, when you have your sonic cleaner, you break it down.
Oh, a little bit of purple power,
Uh-huh.
like a little bit, like a quarter of an inch on the bottom, and then warm water the rest of the way. That's worked pretty good. I made the mistake of putting that Windsor Newton cleaner in there, and that about ate up.
Yeah.
That's too harsh. In fact, that's why my brush is no longer copper on the back. It used to be a nice copper color, but I stripped that baby.
I had a Grex that has that green plated on the back of it that I put in the Windsor and Newton, and it's gone.
Yeah. Now there's a couple parts of the brush that I don't bother to put in the cleaner. I mean, I break it down, and this mechanism on bottom, obviously there's no paint through there, so I don't put it in the cleaner. I take the gauge back here. I don't put that in the cleaner. But the parts that come in contact that paint goes through, I put them in. Usually it takes, the little nozzle takes a little longer than the other parts, but I have to get that out later. What's that? Oh, I'm sorry.
So let's say you have very porcelain skin type character. You wanted to see a little of those veins underneath. About, let's say, would you like, let's say, the watercolor, the veins in, for example?
Probably before I got to like when I was in the middle, I might put those in lightly
Yeah.
and then put the final layers on top. Because since I'm using transparent and semi-transparent, you'll still see them, but they won't look so too harsh. You don't want them to be too harsh. Another thing I use is stencils. If the figure, I have a table over there where I'm selling some old build-ups. There's a Morlock, and there was a stencil that I used, and I put it on and I used the stencil to get the blotchy look. I mean, you can do, they call it noodling. You know, when you're spraying, you're going all noodling, so you're painting kind of lines, just random scribbles. And you can build up a color that way. A lot of times I'll do that with a male figure or a monster to build those up. I mean, it's only these preconceived ideas of girl kits and how they should be perfectly smooth and everything. Although I was telling somebody I have a kit, it's about this big, it's called 38 Special. It's an old kit of a nude, and she's standing by a screen. And I want to do her with mottled skin and some freckles and some moles and make it as natural as I can. Not the pristine, cartoony porcelain.
And if you had a tattoo or tattoos on it, would you put at least one or two transparent layers?
I might.
Yeah.
You otherwise it looks like it's on top.
Right.
You want, now I know some people will use transparent colors so you still see what's underneath, but I would probably put it, I have never done one. I know there are people who've done one, but I would put it on probably in the middle and build up with my final layers of thin misted. When you first start, you're putting it on opaque, you're putting it on a little heavier, but as you go, it's lighter and lighter and more transparent. Yep.
What do you use to do the veins?
Well, with the girl kits, I don't have to worry about that. Nobody wants to see the veins. But the veining is sort of, like I said, probably before I start into the semi-transparents, I might use a semi-transparent to vein, and then put my finished colors over top of it, so that it's underneath. It's not on the surface. It's under the layers. If they start to fade away on you, you can always add again, and then, But I wouldn't do them last. I wouldn't do them next to last. It's too much on the surface then. Anything else? Yep.
If you're doing like a zombie or like a Bride of something that's more morbid and dead, would you still use the same technique going dark to light?
Yeah, I do. That's my approach is the same. The colors might change. The surface won't be smooth. It'll be more mottled. It'll be more, But it's just the way I work. I always start when I'm painting the clothing. If it's a blue shirt, I put the darkest blue on first, and then I'll go to the mids, and then the highlight things. It's just what it works for me. And I know some people have tried it, and they say, I don't know how you do it. I can't stand it. We had one of these at a Jersey Fest a couple years ago. We were talking about this. They used to have a little meet in the after hours, like a little party, bring something and talk. And Steve Park was there, and we were talking, and Steve said, "I've watched Jim, I've seen him, I don't know how he does it." You know? It's like, it's just the way it works for me. Some people it works, others it doesn't. But I like to stick my head in and see what other people are doing. Sometimes it will confirm my approach. Sometimes I see something that they're doing, and I'm like, okay, I like that. That's a good idea. I can try that. You know, you pick and choose. You pull what works. You add it to your repertoire, and you know, the goal is to get things a little better. And I'm glad to share, and hopefully this was somewhat helpful. Any other questions? We got, well, we're done, but hey. If you want to, there's nobody after us, so I don't have to worry. If you have questions, feel free to stay. Yes.
On a 1-1 bust scale,
Yeah.
just a face, you would do more modeling starting from
Oh
the
yeah,
parts?
definitely.
More modeling, because with that scale, you couldn't see it probably anyway.
I've done it with some. There was I didn't bring it. It was a Nosferatu, whatever, but she was dead, and I modeled her
Wow.
skin. I mean, and if you look at it, you can see it.
Right.
I don't know if she was an article or not. I don't know if it made it to the magazine. I wrote so many articles, I can't remember which
Awesome.
one's got it. Thank you. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I couldn't find that. Don't